I'm just popping on to do a little update on my coffee journey so far. I've had the Sage the Barista Express for just under a couple of weeks, and it's going really well. So I just thought I would do a little video to talk about all the things that I have learned so far, and maybe a couple of things that I'm struggling with at the minute as well. Okay, so first things first, the setup for it was pretty straightforward. I just watched a couple of YouTube videos on setting it up just to make sure that I was doing it correctly. But yeah, it's pretty straightforward. The instruction booklet explains how to set the filter up, so that was super easy. And then it's fairly obvious where all the bits and bobs go. You just have to do like a flush through of the system, which takes a little while, but really not that long at all. And then yeah, you're sort of good to go. I bought my first bag of beans from a local independent coffee shop. It was a bit awkward because I wanted to kind of go in and ask them some questions, but because of everything going on at the minute, obviously they're only doing takeaway. We're in lockdown in the UK. Yeah, so they're only doing takeaway coffee, so it was sort of a bit awkward. They were stood quite far away from me and I didn't really get to ask them any questions, but yeah, I'm definitely just going to go around a few different coffee shops and say that I'm learning and see if they've got any advice for me. The second bag of beans that I bought, they were really helpful and friendly. They suggested the grind size for that bag, and explained, I bought two and they explained like the difference in them both, one being more fruity. So yeah, in terms of using the machine, there's probably three main factors that you need to think about. The main factors generally in terms of pulling a good espresso shot are grind size, dosage, and I'd say water pressure, or yeah, I guess the pressure gauge. So the Sage does actually have a gauge in the middle that shows you, as you're pulling your shot, how much pressure is being used. So that is all dependent on whether your beans have been ground to the right size, whether you have got the right amount in the basket, maybe a bit how well you've tamped it. But from what I've gathered so far from speaking to baristas and just online, the tamping doesn't make a huge difference to the final shot, which was fairly interesting. I thought it would make quite a big difference, but yeah, apparently it's not something to sort of overthink and worry about, which I was definitely doing in the beginning. The Sage Barista booklet says to start with your grind size on 8. So the grind size is, I think the dial goes up to, I don't know, maybe like 15 plus. I'm not sure, I've not got that high, but the lower numbers, so from 1 would be a really, really fine grind size, and then the higher you go, the more coarse it is. Yeah, so they suggest starting with 8, which I did, but actually I'd probably go down a little bit next time, and always start from maybe like 4 or 5, and then if that's too fine and the water can't get through, obviously move the number up a little bit. Yeah, the one that I've been using this week, the grind size needs to be quite low, so it's actually only on 2. Yeah, and so the grind size basically determines how much surface area of the coffee will be touched by the water as it comes through. So the way I've sort of got my head around that is, if the coffee beans are quite coarse and they're in bigger, yeah, like bigger chunks, you want to think maybe of like sea salt chunks. If there's loads of really big chunks, the water's just going to pass through really quickly and it's going to be under extracted, because it's only sort of touching the outside of those big chunks instead of all the bits in the middle. Whereas if you grind it up much finer, all those bits in the middle of those chunks are spread out more, and so therefore there's more surface area of coffee to be touched by the water. So yeah, it took me a little minute to get my head around that, but the finer it is, basically more coffee is going to come through. But then if you if it's too fine, then the water's going to find it too difficult to come through, and it's just nothing's going to come out in your shot, and that'll be probably over extracted. I'm not sure if I'm using that term correctly, but yeah. So once you find the right grind size for your bean, and it will be different for every bean that you use, so every time you buy some new beans, even if you re-buy the same bean but it's a new bag, you'll have to just test out the grind size with your first few shots. I think to do with like the roasting process and how much oil is on the bean, or if it's a little bit drier, temperature it's been stored at, all those kind of things, I think they affect what the finished product is, and therefore your grind size will need to be different. Okay, yeah, so once you've got your grind size, you then need to figure out your dosage. So the Sage the Barista has a dial which they suggest setting at 3 o'clock, and I think 3 o'clock must be the right amount for the baskets that they provide you. So the baskets are 54 millimeters, I think, and I've figured out that a double works best with about 18 grams of coffee, and so a single, you know, like 8 or 9 grams of coffee. So to be honest, I always weigh out the beans before I put them in the grinder, just because I've read that if you pour the whole bag in and it's just left in there, the beans sort of deteriorate much quicker than if you leave them in an airtight container. That's what I've read anyway. I could be wrong about that, but yeah, for now I've just been weighing out the exact amount that I want per cup of coffee. So you know, obviously at the minute I'm just making coffees for myself throughout the day, so it doesn't really matter that much. If you're working in a shop, you obviously need a lot more because you can't be weighing it out every time you want to make a coffee. But yeah, for now I'm just weighing the exact amount. So I'm weighing out 18 grams of coffee, popping that in the grinder, and then using the, like I say, double, I think it's the single wall basket, whichever the one is that you use for freshly ground coffee. Yeah, and then the machine has either an automatic push setting for the grinding the coffee, which is fine, but I have been doing it manually lately. So you push it in and hold, and then take it off whenever you want the grinder to stop. So I've been taking it off and just flattening it out, and then going back in, flattening it out, and then finishing it off before I tamp it, just so that the coffee is more evenly distributed in the basket. Yeah, I think that helps with the pressure and everything when you are pulling your shot. So in terms of the actual grind amount dial, I've not really used that yet, or had to work out how to use that yet, because I'm just grinding the exact amount every time, so it's a little bit irrelevant. But as I get a bit further on with my progress, I will probably have a play around with that, maybe pour half a bag in and then work out where the dial needs to be set for 18 grams. But yeah, for now I'm not really using that dial. Then you've got your coffee in the basket, and you're going to pop that in the what's it called, the group head. And then there's two buttons, there's a single cup button and a double cup button, so you want to be using the double. And then yeah, once you press for that to go, the machine kind of then just obviously does its own thing, but whether it's a good shot or not will all depend on whether the grind has been the right size, you've got the right dosage. Yeah, so for the first few shots I pulled, they were okay, but I actually spoke to a barista trainer online, and they told me that there was too much water coming through, so it's actually set to have 60 milliliters of water come through for a double shot, which is quite a lot, because the ratio that's recommended is about 1 to 1.5 or 1 to 2. So for every 18 grams of coffee you want to have either 27 or 36 grams of liquid for the shot. So that's your yield. So yeah, so because it was pulling through 60 millilitres of water, the end of the shot was quite watery. So I actually trialled just manually turning the machine off when the stream started to go like a golden colour, and that worked quite well. I had I think I had around 30 to 35 grams of espresso yield, and then once I'd tasted that and made it into, I added some milk to that, the end coffee was actually much stronger and nicer than the previous ones that I'd been doing. So yeah, that was another thing to kind of get my head around, that the actual espresso shot needed to be stronger. Even though there's less liquid, I guess it was then more concentrated with coffee, so therefore once you add your milk to that, it's a much stronger tasting coffee. But then I tried to program the Sage machine to automatically stop after like 36 mils of water, but that's proved to be a little bit difficult. I think it's probably because I haven't got an exact set of scales. Like the scales that I'm using, they are digital, but they're just kitchen scales, so they aren't like to the gram precise, which I think is quite important. So I am going to try and get some more precise scales. But yeah, for now I've just been sort of doing it by eyeballing it, as in measuring out 36 grams of water, putting that next to another cup under the group head, and then stopping when it looks level. Because when I was putting the scales on the tray with the cup under the group head, the scales were just not, they were going up and down, and it just wasn't very accurate. So I've struggled to change the program to stop at 36 grams or millilitres exactly. So I'm still working on that. And also when I first did it, I obviously did it as far too little, and it was only pulling like less than 20 mils of water, less than 20 mils of espresso, and it was really strong and bitter, and the pressure was too high. But yeah, I'm just sort of playing around with that at the minute. Hopefully going to get the shot volume correct, and then we won't have to manually stop the machine when the stream has gone golden colour. I mean, again, that's not a problem because I'm only making coffee for myself, not for the masses. But yeah, it's just, these are all sort of things that I'm working on and learning. Latte art is still very much not a thing. It's much harder than it looks. But I'll maybe do another video on texturising the milk and pouring the milk. Probably just keep this video dedicated to pulling the espresso shot. So yeah, I don't think there's much else to update you on. If you are at the same place as me in my barista journey, my advice would be just to keep playing around, try not to get too frustrated. If it's not working out, it can be very frustrating when you pull a shot and it's not drinkable because you feel like you're wasting the coffee. I did actually buy some cheaper beans from Amazon, which probably won't be as great. I've not tried them yet, but it was like half the price for double the amount of beans. So that's just going to be my sort of playing around bean, so I don't feel like I'm wasting really good stuff. Okay, I'll leave it there for today. I'm going to go downstairs and make an espresso now, so I'll film that for you and you can have a little look at my current shot pulling ability. So yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.